Dragon Age the Veilguard's combat is extremely different from previous games in the series, and there's a lot to learn if you want to use your 3-person team to the best of their abilities. Here are our 10 combat tips to help put those elven gods back in their place. The parry timing in Veilguard is pretty strict, but there is a tell that can help you nail it. While only attacks with yellow indicators can be parried or blocked, and reds need to be dodged, outside of certain later game skills, the yellow bubbles will have a clear indicator before they turn yellow, while the red attacks get no warning. So while your brain may be primed to look for the yellow indicator, you can focus on seeing the clear one first, as that will always turn out to be yellow. Reds just show up as red immediately. If you're still finding the parry timing too tough, you can increase the window in which you can parry by changing the combat timing option in the advanced combat settings in the gameplay menu. When building your party, one of your first concerns should be triggering Detonation, a massive AoE attack that can have further effects. Detonations are triggered by a party member applying one of 3 status effects, Overwhelmed, Weakness, or Sundered, by using a primer, and then another party member using a detonator for that specific primer. Each class has its role in triggering these. Mages apply Weakened and detonate Sundered, Rogues apply Sundered and detonate Overwhelmed, and Warriors apply Overwhelmed and detonate Weakened. This is why it's useful to have your 3 party members be different classes, so you can cover all your bases. If you look further in each companion skill tree, they also have different secondary effects to go along with the extra AoE damage you get from detonation. For instance, Tosh and Davrin are both warriors, so they can both detonate weakened enemies. But while Tosh's detonations apply burning for extra damage over time, Davrin's can activate Rally Party, a team-wide damage buff. Your mage and rogue companions also all have different healing abilities that can be equipped, but if you make certain story choices to affect that relationship, they may do more damage to enemies at the cost of no longer being able to heal you. While detonations are very important, the status you inflict to prime them can also be useful as well. Weakened enemies do less damage, Sundered makes them take more damage, and Overwhelmed causes faster stagger buildup. There are equipment pieces, abilities, and even enchantments that allow primers to last longer before you need to detonate them, so you can reap the benefits before detonating. It's easy to get into the rhythm of just priming and then detonating immediately, and that can get you pretty far. But try and pay attention to what you need your abilities to do before going for the detonation. If you want to know how long a primer will last, check the bubble next to the enemy's health bar. It will slowly drain as the primer runs out. You can freely refund all your skill points at any time, so don't ever feel railroaded into one playstyle. It can take a little bit for a particular playstyle to click, and once you reach level 20, you'll want to try all your class's specializations, as they can further vary up the combat. In fact, some of the harder bosses and/or difficulties almost demand that you switch things up. If you're building towards full necrotic damage against enemies that are resistant to necrotic, it's worth it to rethink the encounter beforehand rather than just beat your head against it. Don't forget too that if you like a particular companion combination, but dislike how you spent skill points for them, you can reset their skill tree at any time and reconfigure it to better suit your needs. Battles in Veilguard can be hectic, and it can be tempting to just wail on your enemies. But if you're out-leveled or are playing in a high difficulty, it can turn ugly fast. Holding up the Radial menu lets you flick between targets, observe what damage types enemies are weak or strong against, and can help you prioritize troublesome ranged enemies. We often had more success when we slowed things down, really took in our surroundings, and made conscious choices to focus down enemies that we could either get rid of quickly or that we needed to not ignore. This doesn't only mean using abilities, but telling your companions to just target particular enemies as well. Even if the shield you just picked up isn't useful right now, once it's leveled through finding duplicates or visiting the caretaker, you'll be able to use a wide variety of equipment effectively. Many skills reward you for either mixing and matching or doubling down on different equipment weights, and sometimes you may want to trade a high defense for better skill damage, or vice versa. The warrior tree in particular has nodes like heavy armor mastery, which adds another 20% to your defense and makes you less likely to be disrupted if you're wearing both heavy armor and a heavy helmet. And Eclectic Armorer, which increases shield bounces, ranged attack damage, and weak point damage if you have armor of varying weights equipped. In conjunction with our previous tip, There are so many ways to adjust your own skill trees and those of your companions that you shouldn't ever discount pieces you pick up, even if their use isn't immediately apparent. Yours and your companion's abilities are initially placed on the ability wheel and ability shortcuts menus without any rhyme or reason. This may lead to some disjointed or confusing commands when ordering your companions to attack or heal you. It's best to take the time to organize these in a way that makes sense. The best examples of these are primers and detonators. In the heat of battle, you'll want to make sure these are easy to remember. For example, on a PlayStation controller, setting R1 and R2 to your primers and detonators just makes sense and will soon become muscle memory. Whichever way you choose, get used to the symbols for primer and detonator, as they'll appear on the fly depending on when they're available to use. You can change the order of everyone's abilities in the companion menu. Dragon Age the Veilguard has a lot of terms for negative and positive status effects, and you'd hardly be blamed if you can't remember them. Luckily, they make it pretty easy to know exactly what you're gaining when equipping gear or selecting skill tree nodes. When hovering over a piece of equipment, be it weapons, armor, or accessories, you can always press the Details button to quickly learn what a term means. For example, if a belt grants immovable on a potion use, pressing the Details button will explain exactly what immovable is, an immunity to physical reaction and interruptions. Same thing goes for your skill tree nodes. If a node grants you plus 10 affliction damage, pressing the Details button will explain exactly what an affliction is. Some of these terms can even seem to make sense at first glance, but specifics can be important to understand. For instance, the low health state is anything under 30%, and the high health state means a target hasn't taken more than 10% damage. When you need a refresher on these terms, head to the library menu and check out the glossary. This will show all the terms on one page. Looking at the details for a specific piece of gear you're equipping is just a bit faster for what you need in the moment. We covered this briefly in another tips video, but it's worth repeating. Positive and negative status effects like afflictions, advantages, and skill activations are all shown in the bottom left of the screen, and colored red for negative and green for positive. A good sign that your kit, the combination of your weapons, armor, accessories, and abilities, is well prepared, is seeing a lot of green text down here. Along with tuning your skill and equipment loadouts, the special Lyrium Dagger also has several rune slots. And while the passives attached to these runes will be persistent for all the runes equipped, you can only use one active rune at a time when you activate the dagger. You can swap your active rune by pressing left on the D-pad, and then activate it in your radial menu by pressing triangle, or, when not in the radial menu, just using the triangle shortcut while holding the left trigger. You'll gain the active ability of that rune for a short time. If you don't have many runes yet, don't worry, you'll find plenty randomly during your adventure. For more on Dragon Age the Veilguard, be sure to check out our full guide and walkthrough on IGN.com, and for everything else gaming, you're already in the right place. IGN.